Aparillo is a dual FM operator synthesizer with a unique and highly customizable unison mode to modulate individual voices differently from each other to create complex atonal and emotive sounds. It makes sounds like I've never heard before. It's like a movie soundtrack machine. I'm going to start from the back and work towards the actual FM operators for this overview because the orbiter, which is a new and interactive way to morph the sound, gives a great overview of the sound shaping possibilities, plus it's just really cool to play with. Let's load up this coinery patch and make some sound. So what's going on here? We have a canvas, or the cosmos, scattered with objects. Each one of these represents some characteristics of the sound that's from one of the other pages, which we'll get to shortly, but by moving the central point, or the orbiter, it gravitates and modulates those particular characteristics, shaping modules in various ways depending on how you have them set up, which you can do by right-clicking on them. For each module you can choose the amount, radius, level, and pan, with the amount and radius determining how much of that module is active depending on its proximity to the orbiter. You can also record the orbiter movements into a buffer, and have it play back at various speeds so each time you hit a new note, it follows the pattern. You can also set it to key mode, which allows you to set an orbiter position per MIDI note, and each time it's played, it'll jump to that position. But the real fun with this is the randomization options, allowing us to randomize the placement, radius, amount, and either the mouse recorder or key recorder mode. Let me just randomize the radius and placement and amount, and then the key recorder mode, and I'm just going to play some notes. You'll notice each one has a new sound as the orbiter teleports around the cosmos. And of course, you can also attach the orbiter to MIDI or host automation, and it makes it really fun with an XY pad. So what's actually making this sound? Well, let's head over to the synth engine and have a quick look. There's no way I can explain the full capabilities of this engine in one video, however there will be more tutorials following this overview with much more in-depth guides. Let me just initialize the patch to start from scratch. So we have a dual FM operator setup, each with a modulator and a carrier. Nothing groundbreaking so far, right? Just wait. Each operator has a ratio and an amount, as well as 3 different relationship algorithms so they can modulate each other in different ways. There's also 3 different harmonic modes which change the way the ratio works. We can turn it off to have an unharmonic sound, which is good for sound effects and things that don't require accurate pitch. There's a quantized mode which moves up the Faraday sequence, meaning every ratio is going to be mathematically relevant, resulting in more tuned sounds, and there's a harmonic mode which has a selection of 40 different ratios which are specially designed for just sounding really good. So back to the custom unison voices concept. I'm going to open up one of the modulation options below the fader, choose ramp up and adjust the amount. You'll notice 16 small faders on the slider change. This is altering the amount of the 16 individual voices, and it's not just this slider, it works across many other sliders too. So by now you've probably noticed this moving centerpiece. This is the dual LFO area, however each LFO has its own commands as well. First, let's assign LFO2 to the brightness fader. You'll see it moving all the 16 voices in time with the 16 dots. However, if we open up the LFO2 modulation, we can adjust the jitter, which starts making the dots go out of sync, resulting in the 16 voice controls on the brightness fader acting accordingly. We can also change the LFO mode to collision, so anytime it hits one of LFO1's dots, it resets. Now LFO1 is acting as a kind of a wall as it modulates. We also have form, jitter, pop balance and level, but I need to cover these in another video because I want to move on to another epic addition, the shift tool. Shift has a scale engine that lets you set your 16 voices to different pitches. You can choose predefined scales such as major or minor, or adjust them yourself. There's a quantize button so you always hit the right frequency, or you can turn it off if you want to be crazy. As I move the shift amount up using an up ramp, you'll hear it separates the voices out to different pitches, creating a chord out of one single note. A cool way to use this is to create interesting melodic runs by turning on the quantize mode, attaching it to an LFO, turning up the sample and hold so we get a full scale played, and then add a little bit of jitter to get voices playing different notes. Moving up to the Arpeggiator. It's moving through the voices right now, but there's different options to pick and trigger voices at specific times. The cool addition here is the decay knob, which has a major impact on the sonic character. The ARP has 4 modes of triggering. Threshold mode for LFO1 and LFO2. This will trigger the up if any of the 16 voices in the LFO lanes cross the threshold point, which you can set with the threshold knob. Collision mode will trigger the corresponding voice if any of the LFOs cross or collide in any of the 16 tubes. Dial up the rate to trigger every collision, or down to trigger every 16th collision. Clock mode turns it into a step sequencer with the rate knob controlling its speed and direction. Alright, let's move over to the effects page. We've got a new lush reverb, a delay, a panner, and a filter with a number of settings, but the real magic here is the Spacializer. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It can be a delay, a reverb, a pitch controlled resonator. The spatial range changes it from small, medium, large, pitch, and sync if you're in a host. The feedback brings up the reverb, if that's what you want to call it, but in the higher realms, things start getting super weird and modal. This definitely deserves its own tutorial, but let me quickly show you a few examples of how it sounds. Notice when it's 100% wet, it's pretty much acting as a resonator with the synth engine acting as an exciter. Over to the envelopes page, we've got two ADSR control envelopes, however each of these has its own voice modulation options, much like the synth controls, allowing you to change the envelope for each individual voice, and that amount can be modulated also. You can see how intricate and programmable the synth is. As we're using shift mode to separate the voices into different notes in a minor chord, let me use the amp attack and decay with a quick ramp up and down to fade these notes in and out sequentially. We can also switch on loop mode on the release modulation to repeat this pattern over and over. Now with just one note, it sounds like we're playing a scale. Remember, these envelopes can be applied to many different things, not just the volume of the voices. In the upper left hand corner you can switch to polyphon mode, so you can actually use this as a polyphonic synthesizer with 16 voices, if you choose to do so. Finally, let's jump back to the orbiter so I can show you once again how easy it is to create sounds. I'm just going to load up another preset and move the orbiter around. As I said, if any of this went over your head, stay tuned as I'm going to be going through each section covering every parameter in the following days. This machine may seem complicated, and that's because it is. It's an instrument, but it's worth learning like you would a real instrument, because once you do, you'll be a virtuoso of sound design. My name's Tom Cosm, and that was an overview of Sugarbyte's Aparillo.